Hey. Welcome to episode 272 of Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. This episode is entitled The PhD Pivot. And before I bring my guest on, it has me thinking about, I generally, I like to think I know who I am. But sometimes I'm just completely wrong. Like for much of my life, I thought I would never want a career as a public speaker, let alone a podcaster, because I didn't like the sound of my voice and didn't want to hurt far and wide. Well, you guessed it. I was very wrong about that. And my guest today, who is a brilliant man, thought he understood exactly where he wanted to go in life, but 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 at a certain point he pivoted, and his story involves getting a doctorate degree. You guessed it, because the episode's the PhD pivot. So yeah. So please help me welcome our guest today. But first, this.
Today's guest, Paul Abel.
This music has got me in the mood to dance in my chair. Let me bring on my guest, and I hope he'll dance too. Hey, welcome, Paul. Will you dance to the music a little bit?
I don't know it as well. You'd have to play it again, but I don't think you want to see me dance.
Good. So they'll just have to put up with me dancing. Thank you. Thank you all. So thanks for being here, Paul. As I get to know you, I'm intrigued by who you were as a kid. It sounds like you were extremely curious about nature and how things work. Where do you think that came from?
I don't know. I don't know if it was genetics or I just was always a kid that loved nature and discovering. And I guess I was a geeky kid that from the get-go, genetics maybe.
Well, when you say genetics, what do your parents do?
My dad he was professional side. He was a attorney. My mom, she was housewoman, I guess, at the time.
Nice. So yeah, as a kid, one of your stories involved bees. Can you tell us about becoming curious about bees?
I can, although if there's any bee lovers in the audience, no animals were hurt in the telling of this story, right? So as a kid growing up, it was warm outside. We had a lot of bushes. We had a lot of bees that would buzz around, and I was
And
curious.
you grew up in San Diego, California area, right?
Yeah, I grew up in San Diego, and what I thought would be fun is to see what happens if I froze them or if I put them in the fridge. So I would go around. I had these little margarine containers that my mom has, and I would like grab one, capture it in there, and then I'd throw it in the fridge and in the freezer and see what would happen afterwards. That was my initial experiments.
And what was your hypothesis when you began this experiment?
I don't know if I had a hypothesis. It was more of, and I wasn't torturing them. I wanted to know what would happen. Would they And yeah, I don't know where it came from, but I just wanted to know what would happen. Would they survive? Would they slow down? Would they? It was just kind of curiosity, I guess.
And what did you discover?
So I discovered if you put them in the fridge, stick them on the shelf for a little while, you'd get in trouble when your mom opened the fridge and thought she was opening butter and got a bee in her face. That was one thing I discovered. The other thing I
That
discovered
was an important discovery.
was an important discovery. And then the other one it was interesting because I would kid, right? So put them in the freezer, you pull them out after a day or so, they wouldn't move. But if you put them in the popcorn popper to heat them up, they would eventually recover and start to fly around and they would be fine. So yeah, it was sort of the one of the first crypto freezing life extension programs, I guess.
So you literally figured out how to resuscitate bees in the popcorn popper.
Exactly.
Wow. And how old were you at this time?
Oh, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9, somewhere around there. It was before, yeah, maybe 8, 9, or 10, something like that.
Think about that level of curiosity and just going out into the world and observing something and saying, "Oh, I wonder if what would happen."
I
Do you think you maintain that level of curiosity as you like went on to high school?
I think I retained curiosity. I mean, I was curious about other things besides insects, but yeah, I think the curiosity thing stuck with me.
What were some of the other things you were curious about as a kid?
Well, it'll date me, right? But back in the day when there was just computers getting set up in the schools, it would be fun to do simple little programs to, make the computer say a word over and over and over again, and the teacher had to turn it off to get it to reboot. But it was, yeah, I always had sort of a curiosity. How do things work and what makes things tick? That was always kind of my interest level.
For the younger viewers out there, Paul is talking about probably like a pet computer. It had a green screen and green flashing cursor, and we were using the computer language was called BASIC, maybe.
Basic and Fortran, and this was back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. And for the younger audience, right? This was a long time ago.
I only got as far as basic, Paul. I didn't get into any of that fancy Fortran stuff. A- And then you also wanted to check out a book on human anatomy from the library. So you were fascinated with how the human body worked.
Yeah, that was my interest. That was more of my interest as I went into high school and beyond, was kind of the body, the human body. How does it work? How are the muscles put together? How is the brain put together? That became, yeah, that was a book that I rented or borrowed multiple times at the library when I was growing up. I just get excited about that. I got excited about that.
And then in high school, you got to di- dissect a cat, and when I hear that, I think of the smell of formaldehyde, and I think doing something I really don't want to do in the least. But what fascinated you about that?
To me, I thought it was, and I don't know if they still do cats, but it was every two people got their own little cat to dissect in the classroom, which was, for me it was fun. But yeah, it smelled like formaldehyde. But what I thought was interesting is, like, you open it up and there's the superficial fascia. There's all these layers of It's not just the muscles, but it's the stuff around the muscles that, you see if you're cooking dinner with chicken or something, but to know kind of how everything's, I don't know. I guess I just liked learning how everything was put together. Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things where it's ever since birth, I was always kind of curious of how things work.
That's cool. Do you have any thoughts on getting young people more interested in science? Maybe like I remember having some of that curiosity, but losing a lot of it as I grew up. What are your thoughts on how I'm changing my question, I'm sorry. What are your thoughts on how we maintain cu curiosity in life? Sorry, that's a really big question, but
Yeah, that's throw me questions that I'm not prepared for. I appreciate it.
yeah,
I
sure. I mean, this is all about trying to stump your opponent, so mm,
No, I think it's a really interesting question. The easy answer would be, well, take everybody's iPads and distraction telephones, take all those devices away and force them into staring at the bushes and looking at the bees fly around, right?
mm,
That might be the easy question, or easy answer. But knowing that that's not possible, it's a really good question of how do you get people interested and excited about things that maybe they haven't been exposed to with everything curated. And because you watch this, then you watch this, then you watch this. It's an interesting challenge of how do you get people to be outside of the channel that they've fallen down and look at something completely different? I could philosophize about that for a while, but I haven't given it much thought.
do, do you have a uh, few philosophizing thoughts on it? Just, I mean, I'm fascinated personally in hearing fascinated. I am fascinated personally. That was redundant, but I'm fascinated in the subject, so I would love to hear what you have to say.
I don't know. It's a really good question of what can you do. And I think maybe there's something with, artificial intelligence that you could do as a young teacher, instructor, to give tasks to students that might expose them to something using technology that they haven't thought about or they haven't considered. It's a really interesting question, but I haven't really spent too much time thinking about it. So I don't know if I could give you a good response.
Yeah, and I don't think I could give you a great response either. But as part of I love creating the questions. I own it. Yeah, yeah.
You should do a podcast if you like creating questions.
Hey, that's a good idea. Yeah. I might consider that. I'm kind of resistant to the idea though, but thanks. Maybe someday. So, so So after high school, what colleges were you looking at?
So after high school, I ended up I took some classes at small universities. I ended up going to a teaching university, and so it was it was kind of a path of I went to school 1, then I went to school 2, and then I went to school 3. And it was following my interest in biology and trying to find kind of the right level of challenge. The first couple schools I went to, I didn't find as challenging enough. And then I went to the final school where I graduated, where I felt like I was being challenged more.
That's that's really. I mean, it's important in life to to find things that challenge us, but it's really important.
Mhm.
Um, so what was the final school you went to? And we say in the description, so I know it's not private information. The
Oh,
final
okay. You gave it away.
final school was UCLA, right?
Yeah. That's where I did my undergraduate.
What classes at UCLA do you remember most interesting you?
Well, the one that I really was not interested in was ichthyology, the study of fish. So for those, you know, many people have been there where you have to take a class, you have to take, it fits with your schedule and all of that. And I had to take a biology class, was stuck with ichthyology, the study of fish, with 8 other students that probably were in the same situation of running out of classes. So that was one. The ones that I really liked at UCLA, they were small little courses, seminars, and they were all about neuroscience. So one was the neuroscience of vision, one was the neuroscience of pain. It was all around how does the brain work and how does it take information and process it and help people perceive things. Those are the ones that I really gravitated towards.
That'd be sounds so interesting understanding more of the science behind pain, for instance. Because as a layperson, I get a feeling of pain and I have no idea where that's from. And
Yeah,
did it help you relate to pain differently at all?
I don't think it helped me relate to pain, but it was interesting to know, okay, something happens, say, in your skin, and then your neuron fires, and then that fires, and it goes, so there, I think it was interesting to know how it works, but I don't think it had an impact one way or the other.
Interesting. And during this time, you were debating about being a doctor. Well, being a medical physician. What was that like, and what changed your mind?
So so I had this interest as a kid, right, in biology, and then I pursued it. So I was a biology major, and I took all the class, the chemistry, organic chemistry, which I hated, biology, all kinds of different biology. And then what happened was is I had a chance to, with a medical student, go visit the hospital at UCLA, and he basically snuck me in. He was telling people I was a first year medical student, which of course I wasn't, but he had me in scrubs and he was in scrubs, and we both kind of walked around the emergency department. And it was, to me, it was interesting. It was really an illuminating experience because you see people, their chest just completely open, heart beating, they're getting ready or they're recovering from a surgery or something. But it seemed to be more, the analogy I have is it was like going to a mechanic at an auto shop. Somebody comes in, they need to get their oil changed. You look up the book, how do I change the oil? You pop the hood, you change the oil, you close the hood, the people go. To me, and sounds terrible to the medical, community, right? But but I felt like it was more of a cookbook kind of experience. It wasn't like I wanted to learn how to make the recipes. I didn't want to just follow the orders that was given. So, and I recognize, right, physicians do a lot more than just follow, there's a lot more to it, right? But that's how it felt at the time in my early 20s of, seeing this experience and kind of realizing, where I'm going, where I'm headed with this medical, not as interesting as I thought it would be.
So once again, I mean, and you just said that that's part of the reason you transferred colleges is because you were seeking a challenge that interested you, and then you realized sounds like that the challenge of being a physician didn't interest you, so what did you do then?
So I was a biology major, and then my last year I changed to psychobiology, which is where I got a chance to take more of those neuroscience classes as an undergraduate at UCLA. And then I got involved with the lab, doing research, and the research side is what I really ended up gravitating towards. So that's where instead of doing the medical school, I went to do the graduate school in neuroscience. That's what interests me.
What is psychobiology basically for someone who doesn't know much about it?
I think it's the old school way of saying neuroscience. It's kind of the interaction between the brain and psychology. So it's how's that for me just breaking the terms apart and using them. It's sort of what's the biological basis of behavior? What's the biological basis of perception? It sort of combined the interesting elements. It to me it combines the interesting elements of biology with how does that impact you as an individual.
Wow, sounds fascinating. And then you get into a PhD program, and how long was that program?
It was 5 years, and the one thing I would say if anybody is watching that wants to go into a PhD program, what I did and the advice I got when I was an undergraduate was to look for a topic or professor that is really interesting to you. So it's not like you're going, I want to get a PhD. It's you want to go study and work with this professor as an example. And that's what I did. I went to the university because I was attracted to this one type of research that this one professor was doing, which was around the visual system in the brain.
It makes a lot of sense if you're going to be doing something for 5 years.
Yeah.
Better be an int interested in it. So when you entered the PhD program, what was your plan for your life?
I was headed down the path of doing research, of being a professor. So I was planning to sort of follow that passion of discovery, of learning things, of in my case, it was learning what's the biological basis of visual perception. And I was fascinated by that. And I was studying it in a variety of different ways with different techniques and technologies.
And with could that have been your whole career, or just studying that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I was headed.
Wow. So would you say when you entered the PhD, what was your degree of certainty that that was where you were headed?
I would say out of 0 and 100%, it was maybe 125%. I mean, I was fully committed, right? I was doing little grants. I got funded to do some of the work. It was absolutely my passion.
So 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 this was your life if I had met you at a cocktail party, it would have been what you would have talked to me about doing, and this was who you were.
Yeah, I mean, I probably would have put you to sleep at a cocktail party talking about neuroscience, but it was my passion. So, yeah, absolutely.
I don't know the ball. I'm interested in a lot of stuff, so
That's true.
might have been kind of a competition if you could put me to sleep or if I could maintain interest.
Fair enough.
So we're going to return to the thread, which is really important to to this podcast because it's called your brilliant title, the PhD pivot. So we're going to get back here, but I want to back up and ho- could you please tell the story of how you met your wife?
How I met my wife. So that was at UCLA undergraduate. We had I had a friend in common with her, so I never met her. I had a friend in common with her. He was this Italian Spanish guy and super fun. We used to do all kinds of fun things together. He had a dinner. And so one night we had a dinner and he invited this woman over and that's how I met her. And it's been 33 years since we've been married. Weeks. That's
Whoa.
Congratulations.
thank you.
So so, so the your courtship, if you will, involved some travel in Europe, right? What was that like?
Yeah, so she was French. She
And she still is French.
yeah, once a French, always a French. But she didn't have a permanent status in the US, so she was studying at UCLA through the student exchange program. So she went after we graduated, she went back to France. I happened to be going to Europe after graduating, and so I went back and I met her and we traveled around a bit. And then we had one of those long distance relationships after I came back to the States. So, but it's so far it's worked out.
How long did you maintain the long distance relationship?
It was just a year that we had the long distance thing, and then we got married shortly thereafter. So it was pretty quick.
Sound like a long year though to be apart.
It was a long year, but it was we'd see each other on vacations. So it was, you know, for Christmas holiday, for holiday vacation, for this, so we had a vacation relationship, if you will. But yeah, it
A
was
vacation relationship. I like that. Yeah. A vacation relationship. So, but no, I'm nervous about this PhD thing because it's your passion. It's where you're going in life. What the heck happened? I mean, what happened to the crayfish that you were experimenting with? And didn't they matter?
so yeah, so basically the way I describe the stories is so I was studying different animals, studying the brain, studying how they're put together, loving the job. And then as I was close to graduating, I ended up being on a search committee. So search committees hire the faculty at the university, and at each university, there's Professor one, there's a chair of the committee, there's another professor, and then they bring on a graduate student working on his PhD as the token graduate student, right? So I was the token graduate student participating on this committee, and it was just illuminating how people get jobs at universities. And I should say this is a large academic, research oriented, maybe different in different settings. But what I found is it was very political.
And how did you feel about that degree of politics?
It was disheartening. So we had at the university, we had like 200, a stack of curriculum vitas or resumes, if you want to call them, this thick, 200 people applying for one job. And our task on the committee was to read through all of these CVs to pick a short list, talk about them as a committee, then bring a smaller list together, then interview those individuals face to face, have them give a presentation, and then eventually, make an offer after a number of meetings. And it was just so that first step of the 200, I read through every single one. I made my pile of 10 that I thought were just amazing scientists, had all these incredible credentials. And I came to the meeting with the faculty to talk about my 10, to talk about others, we look for overlap. And what I discovered is sort of seeing how the sausage is made, right? Looking at the matrix. And I looked at it going, oh, this is not at all what I expected. What I learned was there was so much politics. So the chair of the committee, Steve, he wanted his postdoctoral student to be considered for this job. And his postdoctoral student was an okay guy, but he had nowhere at all the credentials of some of these people. Some of these people had spent 10 years of their life after their PhD writing paper after paper, making incredible discoveries. And that was compared to this one postdoc that he had that maybe had a year after his PhD and didn't have a lot of credentials. So there was just all this. And then there was fighting around people wanting their type of science in the department. So there was three or four people that had a similar type of science focus. They wanted somebody of a similar domain to be hired just because they would have more leverage in the department or more budget. So I expected that I would finish my PhD, I would go do extra work, build up my curriculum vitae, have all of these papers and be a great scientist, then get hired based on my merit. And what I learned is it wasn't meritocracy as much as who you knew or what type of work that you did or circumstance falling into the place for you to get a job. So I was just completely disillusioned by that experience.
So suddenly from the suddenly from this experience you have massive disillusion on one hand, but you still have your dream and your life purpose as you know it on the other hand. What 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 do you do with those two vastly different things? How do you what happens next? What happened for you next?
It was super difficult because what I could see my path going down is maybe finding a job in a city and a state that I didn't want to live in
Hmm.
just because
Like South Dakota, where I live.
South Dakota would be the worst. Yeah. You end up in South Dakota just because the university wants your type of science and, but maybe you wanted to live somewhere else. So I was learning more and more and I was following my passion and loving what I was doing, but I couldn't see it materializing into a career that I necessarily like. I was stuck with this trade off of do I continue this passion that I have at the sacrifice of perhaps family, perhaps a wife, a city I want to live in. Is it worth all of these trade-offs that you're going to have to make? And that's where I was. And it was a real tough balance at that point.
So in the midst of all the thoughts and how how do you figure out like a next step forward? Because there's so much swirling around in your head, I'm sure about.
It was an opportunistic thing. So my goal was to graduate in 5 years and my, I was on a training grant through NIH that was ending. And so I was assigned to teach a lab called the rat lab. So it's where you get the rats to tip a thing to get a reward. And it's it's a complicated thing. You teach it to undergraduate students and it takes a lot of your time. And I knew if I was going to teach that course, I wouldn't finish on my 5-year schedule because it was just going to be too demanding. I wouldn't be able to work on my thesis. So I said, okay, I'm going to go see if I can find a job. And I ended up getting a job as an intern in business, which paid the bills, which is what I needed. It didn't take as much time and I was able to finish. But through that experience, I learned a different context to do research that was financially beneficial. You could publish research quickly. You didn't have a lot of peer reviews. So it was a fortuitous thing that I had this experience and I learned this is interesting. I can do this stuff and use the tools that I have, follow my curiosity, but I don't have to deal with all of the, ending up in South Dakota if I didn't want to.
Yeah, yeah, which thank goodness for that. Thank goodness. So in a way, not chance, but circumstances helped you out of what could have been a really almost paralyzing quandary.
Yeah, it's true. It turned out to be the circumstances of the setting turned out to be extremely beneficial for me because it made me realize I can do what I like. It's not the domain that I like, but I can do research and study something and have that ability to learn even outside of a science setting.
Now probably will be a good place. pl- Please talk about that a little. So you got a PhD in a very specific form uh, of of neuroscience. Would you please talk about a little about what made that degree what made it versatile for you to pivot and what skills you still use in your work today that you learned from your PhD?
Yeah, I think the aspects it teaches you is being very detail oriented. When you when you write a paper, oftentimes we would read every line of every sentence out loud to make sure we weren't making mistakes. And that's forcing you to be very analytical is a skill that can be really applied in many different areas. The practice of statistics that I learned as a part of the program is very useful in a business setting. And I use a lot of statistics today. I think the other aspect when you're doing science, you have to present your work at conferences. So being able to write a story, talk about work, and present results is a very transferable skill in a business setting. So I ended up getting my degree, finishing my PhD. Then I ended up I continued my internship at this company, finally finished my internship, and then I worked as a consultant where we were still doing research, but it was for a business setting. So a company would be trying to figure out what they should do, what their strategy should be. We would do research, write a report, present it to them. So I applied those skills. It wasn't without stumbling blocks, right? So when I first got my PhD and I got my first consulting role, at one point I remember being at a printer copying papers for someone else, more senior consultant. And I'm thinking to myself, and for the younger viewers, you used to have these machines that would copy papers. But I was putting a piece of paper on the printer, copying it for someone senior to me. And I'm thinking, I have a PhD and somebody just told me to copy papers. And that's what I'm doing as my job, which was a little humbling. It brought my ego down a little bit. But any of it, there was challenges along the way. But I found through that experience, learning research, learning consulting, I was able to follow my research career in a different domain throughout up until today.
This is so interesting because I mean, many of us will pivot for various reasons in our career, and sometimes, like with a sudden schooling, it might be easy to think, "Oh my gosh, I only have these one set of skills. I have to do X, Y, Z because that's what I know." But it's interesting to think how can what you've learned be applied. What you've learned and spent a lot of time and money to learn be applied in another domain.
Yeah, it took a lot of trials to get my first consulting job and a lot of sending out resumes and cover letters to try to get interviews. It was not at all easy. I think having that internship when I was still finishing my degree was very helpful because I had some experience that I could reference, but it was only 6 months. It wasn't years and years of experience, but yeah, it took a long time trying to figure out how do you market the skills that you have, thinking about the skills you have, how can you make them applicable to a different domain? Um,
How long would you say you were applying for positions during that time?
I must have, at least 3 months, I think I was applying. I would say probably 3 months. Yeah, there was more behind that because we were in Seattle. My wife had moved to Portland, so we were doing a long distance relationship again. I was looking for jobs in Portland, and so we were commuting back and forth. So, but it was so there's more involved in that story, but I think it was probably a good 3 months of a lot of rejections, getting a letter saying, "You don't meet our qualifications," or, "We've already hired somebody." So it was just persistence at continuing to try to break through.
What are your ideas for someone who is applying for something and keeps getting those things but no things letters that we all dread?
I think it's just continuing to think about how you could apply what you have to different settings. So even for this consulting job, I applied to be a statistician because I knew statistics from my degree. I liked statistics. I wasn't as passionate about it. But fortunately, this consulting company saw my resume and said, "Well, maybe not statistics, but maybe he could work as something else in our company as more of a designer of research studies that we do." So it was sort of fortuitous. So I think that the trick is not to give up and not to and think broadly about what you can bring to an organization.
So don't give up, but also keep recreating, keep honing what you're offering
Exactly. Yeah. Keep
as
honing what
a
you're offering
or
and,
your
and
understanding
refining
of
how
what
you
you're offering.
yeah, and your understanding and how you present it. I think I learned more and more that it's not just here's what I can do, but here's what I think you need and here's what I bring to the table. So it's understanding your audience and knowing what do they need and how do you fit in, if that makes sense.
Th- that can be a big transition in its own life from, "Hey, this is what I do," to to this is what you need and this is how I can help you. That can be a big transition in thinking for people.
Yeah, I think so.
Any other thoughts on how we make that transition?
Well, so eventually I worked at a big company and then I don't want to give too much of my story away, but I ended up starting a consulting company myself. And when I did that, and I didn't have any clients to begin with, I offered services for free initially. And so I would give out my research expertise to others simply to get my name out there, simply to get testimonials for the work that I did. So I think I think that internship initially was very beneficial for me. I think if somebody else were in a science setting and is looking to get out of science because of politics or anything, getting some experience, even if you have to do it for free, can be beneficial just to get and show that you can do something in a different domain, if that makes sense.
So you can demonstrate some skills in the domain you want to go into. Yeah.
And have somebody in that domain that can be your testimonial, or somebody that says, yes, Paul can do that because I've seen him work. It's not just that he sent me a great resume or a great letter. He has experience in it, and I have experience with him firsthand. So I would recommend that you hire him.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think now would be a good time. You wanted this section added into this description. I quote, "Stick around for the finale where Paul shares a never before told reveal about a major setback that happened behind closed doors during his doctoral degree." And I must say, I have no idea what you're going to say next.
Well, so I was thinking, this awkwardly awesome. What does it mean to me, right? So one of the things you can, as you get your PhD, you get you have two major tests. You have a written test and an oral test. The written test is where you get asked everything, and if you pass that, you become a PhD candidate. Then, usually 2 or 3 years later, you take your oral exam, and that's where you become blessed as a PhD. So, for many PhD students, you set your own bar in the sense that you pick the committee that's going to evaluate you.
Hmm.
As I went into my PhD, I said, I'm going to pick the Avengers. I'm going to pick the people that are just amazing and, well-regarded scientists. These are the best people out there. That's going to be my committee. I'm going to be so proud of them, and I'm going to lead them the charge to get the bad guys, right? What it turned out is, and other people would say, I'm going to pick this guy, this guy, this guy, this gal, this gal, this gal, because they're easy, or they're people have said, pick them because they're going to get you your PhD relatively painlessly. So I didn't go that route. I took the Avengers. And the Avengers, what they did is what exactly I hired them to do for free, is they drilled me. And when I took that written exam, usually your advisor, who's the person that's your main lab contact, right? That's the main guy or gal. They will say, hey, you're ready for your written exams. Take them now because you want to focus in on for me, I was proud, smart, always up for the challenge. I said, you know what? I'm ready for my written exams. I'm going to go in there and take them now. And so I go into this room, got all the advisors in the room to do my written exams. I'm proud, ready to go in, chest out, walk in the door. The first question I get asked, you get asked these questions by each of your committee members. First question, simple. I got this, no problem. His question actually was around pain. He was a smart guy. He said, I diverged briefly, but he said, I fell off my bike on the way to on school today. I hurt my knee. I rubbed around my knee and the pain went away. He said, tell me why that happened. What's going on in the brain and in the nerve and in the knee and all that stuff. Simple. Got that. Wrote it down.
So,
Next,
so they're asking you questions and then you're writing them down on a piece of paper.
on a piece of paper. Yeah. So I'm old school, pre-computer for everything. I was writing them down on a piece of paper. The next one, Ed Rubel, he asked me, tell me about as much as you can about the Hebbian synapse. And he could have said that in Mandarin. He could have said that in any possible language. What immediately happened is my brain cells went on strike. They said,
Mm.
we're gone. We ain't working, Paul. Sorry. You can try all you want to find out about the Hebbian synapse. Ain't there. So I looked at him blankly. I looked at the clock. I hear it ticking. And it's this moment of just dread and silence of what the heck am I going to say? And at the time, I'm walking in, got my ego completely shut down. I'm like, oh my God, what am I have no idea. And I told him, there's not much I can say. I don't recall. Hit the next question, different person asked. I kind of worked my way through it. I think I know what she's asking for. And any event, after all of this, I had 5 people. After all this, they asked me to step out of the room. I step out of the room like on detention. I sit down in a chair and I'm
Mm.
waiting while they deliberate for 10, 15 minutes. And then they called me back and said I didn't pass.
Mm.
So I failed my written exam. And it's just a humbling feeling,
Mm.
you feel awkward, right?
Mm.
You're not expecting. I had told everybody, hey, I'm going to go take my, exams tomorrow, and, telling them, and to have to come back and just is such a brutal experience of not passing and everybody knowing you expected to pass. They knew you were going to take the test. So any event, but the awesome part of it, I think, is what I learned out of that experience is to be over prepared for things. So after that, I read this 1949 book by Donald Hebb around to, learning about the Hebbian synapse, which ironically, his theory is all about learning and how the brain learns. So it's kind of ironic that I would forget that, right? But so when I went back into the exam, he asked me the same question, and I wrote a whole story about, which chapter it was in and all this thing where he brought it up in the book. But it was this experience where after that, you learn, and it was very helpful in my career, even outside of science, right? To really be prepared. Don't let you think you know things come and sort of overtake what you really know. It sort of brings you back down to humility. So that's the reveal. Nobody knows I failed except for my wife.
Oh, wow. Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's an honor. So, quickly, what are your thoughts on the line between being really prepared and being over prepared?
Yeah, it's a good question because I definitely veer towards the over prepared now. I think ever since that, you know, failing once and then coming back and having to succeed, great, but it teaches you to tend to be over prepared. I think it depends on the setup, right? Or the context. In some presentations that I've given, I've been so prepared that I'll give the talk over and over again, looking at myself in the mirror to see what body language I'm giving, because that'll have an impact on how it's seen. But I think in some instances, spontaneity and just being yourself is important. So I think that line varies depending on the environment you're in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Another part of the story I like a lot is it's wonderful that you did get a second chance to take the written exam. And you took that chance too. You didn't just dump out of the PhD program and say, "Oh, I'm not cut out for this." You got a second chance, and you took that chance, and things worked out a lot better.
Yeah, I think it was a learning of humility, of not thinking that you know more than you do, right? It was, but yeah, they gave me a second chance, and yeah, absolutely, I pursued it. That was before the search committee, right? So I was still on this passion of nothing can stop me from being a scientist. But yeah, it was a strong lesson to learn.
Speaking of stuff like this, on the show, I talk about the power of doing our imperfect best. And what it means to me is I envision the best I want for my life and to give to offer to the world, and I pursue that, but often mistakes, obstacles, uncertainties, frustrations come up, and instead of using all that as a reason to quit, I try to learn from it and remember my vision and renew my focus on going towards my vision in a better prepared way. What does doing your imperfect best mean to you, Paul Abel, PhD?
Um, I think for me, it's taking these life lessons like this experience I had, where I thought, "Oh, I'm gonna lead this group. I'm gonna go in to this room and I'm gonna just ace my written exams." I think at the time, that was really looking back, that was my perfect self because I had this intellectual ego that I thought could never be burst. So going into that, I learned really that was my imperfect self experiencing it because I wasn't ready. I wasn't prepared. It was the best that I was at the time, but I learned from that experience quite a bit that you can't just assume you're ready for something if you're not. Does that make sense?
You can't just assume that you're ready for
It's like you need to be prepared for when opportunity comes and when opportunity comes, you grab onto it, right? But being prepared for those experiences is important. I think that's what it means to me. It's just not giving up. It's learning from your mistakes and there's mistakes that you make all along the way, right? And it's just having that drive to continue.
having that drive to continue. Thank you so much. I have to say once, thank you so much, Dr. Paul, for being on the show and for all you're doing for the kindness you spread in the world and so many big and small ways. I know my life is better because I know you.
Oh, that's very
And,
nice. Thank you.
and please stay on the line. I'm going to end the show and please stay on the line though.
Okay.
Whew. I got through an hour conversation with a PhD. Ah,
And you'll never do that again.
I mean, maybe not until tomorrow, probably. But I thank you all for watching, and I invite you to consider whatever you learned from the show and see how it fits into your life and then I urge you as I so often do in various ways to talk to the widest variety of people you can and be curious. Like Paul has a PhD. I do not. I could be really intimidated by that and say, "Oh, I just can't talk to someone like this because I don't know what to say." But people all have something to share with you, and you know what? people like being asked questions, so just ask questions, be curious, and also be able to give from your own life and your own experience in the conversation. Anyway, that I could go on and on, but I've gone on long enough for now. Anyway, have a great day. Thanks for tuning in. Tune in next time. And remember to smile.